Welcome, everyone, to Eyes on Books, a presentation of the Video Club of Laguna Woods. Today, Terry and I will be discussing New York Times best-selling author T. Jefferson Parker's latest book, 1,000 Steps. This book brings us back to Laguna Beach in the late 1960s. It's a coming-of-age story about a 16-year-old Matt Anthony who is encountering the hippies who are migrating down from the summer of love in San Francisco with their drugs and free love mentality while coping with his dysfunctional family here in Laguna Beach. Terry and I, while researching this book, went down to Laguna Beach and we looked at a lot of the areas that are mentioned in the book.
It was absolutely fascinating to go down there and look at some of those areas. I really enjoyed it so very much. So after reading the book and going down there, I could picture everything that the main character had gone through. Seeing what he did on his bike ride while delivering the newspapers, and I was trying to picture all the hippies out on the beach and the drug scene and everything else that had gone through. But it truly was, as Mike said, a coming-of-age book. And a young, scrawny man of 16, boy of 16, becoming a man in 1 year's time and developing. When he took us to the beach, Laguna Beach, and with Matt, and the diversity of the characters that he introduced us to.
Based a lot around his dysfunctional family. His big sister who was a hippie, his brother who's off in Vietnam, his father and mother who were complete opposites. He's a John Birch cop and she's a hippie drug user. I mean, he developed these characters so beautifully.
And the police officers, the good cop, the bad cop. Right. The hippie folks who were pushing the drugs, the folks who were into the orgies. I mean, it was incredible what was going on and how the author dealt with all of it. The kidnapping of his sister and how he tried to find it. Now that got a little mundane.
But you were right. He made us feel like we were there with these characters, what they were living through. You felt terrible for Matt and what he had to put up with from the cops and from his mother and from his... It was just really well done.
Yes, and he was pulled in so many different directions. And growing up, you would think he would start taking part in all these things that were happening around him. And yet, this kid/man, really held it together. And it was very impressive. So the author did quite an incredible job in making us live through this with him.
I really felt that I was being brought back to that time and felt, you know, going through Matt, going to learning how to drive and how to use a stick shift, and right from the beginning how this is, and then at the end, you know, he's almost a man. What he took on at the end was very, you saw the maturity happening to him within the book. It was marvelously done.
It really was. And then his relationships, he started feeling love or lust or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, as a teenage boy does, yes. And it was hard to believe he could fit that into everything else that was going on in his dysfunctional life. But the author put it together very well, and I really enjoyed the book.
So, and I understand why it's such a hit with some book clubs. People are lining up to get it from the library or wherever they can get it. And I must say, the cover of the book truly, truly reflects what's happening inside the book. It's one of the few book covers that is very impressive.
The cover itself brings you back to that time.
It does.
That's how we were living, yes.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes me want to get back into my hip huggers and my bell bottoms and
Yeah.
and my headbands and grow my hair out and do whatever I did back then.
It was very well done, and it actually brought back the comparison of today, where you saw the split between the hippies and the cops and the left and the right, and we're living through it again. Here we are over 50 years later.
They were good times.
Somewhat good times, yes.
It was a little carefree and had absolutely no idea what was going on in the rest of the world except for the Vietnam War. So, yeah, I rather enjoyed those times. And thank you, Jefferson Parker, for doing what you did. And now we have the opportunity to meet with our author, Jefferson Parker. As with All Eyes on Books, we are going to be bringing in the author through our Zoom opportunity, and we can't wait to meet with him. He is a novelist, and this is his 27th novel. We are just so anxious to meet with him and give him the opportunity to tell us all about himself and let us know what ideas pop into his head and share his ideas.
Welcome, Jeff, to Laguna Woods Eyes on Books.
Nice
We are
to
in
be here.
Laguna Woods, right near your hometown of Laguna Beach. We were, in researching this, we went out and looked at some of your spots you mentioned in the book, and we're real close to where you were. Must have been interesting growing up out there in those days.
Yeah, it really was. You know, I was a Tustin kid. I grew up, a few miles from Laguna, and I started visiting Laguna as a boy. You know, Mom and Dad would take us, into Laguna for various things, and this was back in the early '60s. And in fact, we got our first family dog at the the animal shelter there on Laguna Canyon Road, and that would have been early '60s. And I remember he was a little black, sort of a Cocker Spaniel mix, and he was a puppy, and he was real cute. And we got him, and I think 3 cans of dog food, and some chew toys for him, all for $5. And I'll never forget that day. It was a wonderful introduction to Laguna.
So where did the whole idea for developing the character of Matt come from?
Well, Matt Anthony in 1,000 Steps is a 16-year-old boy with a paper route, kind of making do in a falling apart family in a cold, kind of drafty apartment on 3rd Street. I wanted to write a book, a coming of age story. I've read so many good ones, and I've never tried that before. I never had tried to do a coming of age story. So when I created Matt, I wanted to make him, kind of a representative boy of 16. He's got a little bit of artistic talent, which my brother Matt has, so it's kind of an homage to my little brother in a way. But moreover, I wanted Matt to be kind of a representative guy, 16, growing up. Obviously, he's 16. The year is 1968, and it's a tumultuous year, as you all remember. It was especially tumultuous for a 14-year-old boy named me, T. Jefferson Parker, who saw Laguna really for the first time, second or third time in 1968, and so there's a lot of me and my memories and me and my memories of Laguna in Matt Anthony.
It brought back, since I'm from a similar era, as a paper boy and growing up in that time. It was really brought back the memories that made me enjoy the book even more, I believe.
Yeah, I would think that having been there, I wrote that book for people like us, for people who were there, I mean, and it brought back so many memories that I didn't even know that I really had. I remember the summer of '68, and I remember going to Sound Spectrum with my buddies, and I remember going to Del Taco for lunch, and I remember body surfing at Main Beach, and just kind of being a kid. It was March of 2020, and the COVID lockdowns were starting, and it was a horrible time to be reading the newspaper every morning and wondering, if you were going to get it and all that stuff. And for some reason, I think that COVID lockdown just literally pushed me back 52 years into my time as a boy in Laguna. And I began to remember things and things that I did and people that I'd met, and just the whole scene down there came back to me so vividly, I think, because I was trapped in my little office here and I couldn't go anywhere because of COVID. So I kind of traveled backwards in time to Laguna at a very pivotal, very colorful time.
There is such waiting lists for your book, 1,000 Steps, with different book clubs. It's quite a phenomenon.
Oh, that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah.
Did you ever expect that to happen?
Yeah, well, yeah. I've gotten a lot of attention for this book, especially locally, Southern California. Everybody, old enough to have been, alive and cognizant in 1968, I think are particularly touched by all this. It's kind of, where were you in 1968, and everybody has an answer for that if they're old enough. And then, Southern Californians, especially, I think Californians, and then the rest of the nation too, have always had a real attraction and charm and curiosity about Laguna Beach, even if they've never been there. And so, I always kind of think of myself as a kind of an ambassador of the city in a way. I live stories where I'm living or have lived, and there's something of the love letter, I think, in all of my Laguna books, because I spent so much time there, and they were formative years, a lot of them, young adulthood, and I saw a lot of interesting things. So I'm always kind of tipping my hat to Laguna.
The description of 1968 was awakening to me. I had just come back from Vietnam then, and it was all new to me then, just like it was all new to me in your book. So it was very vivid. I can imagine what he was going through, reading about his brother and seeing where his brother was, waiting for his brother to get home, and what his brother was going through. So a lot of the country was going through that at the time.
Yeah. I wanted to. You can't write a book about 1968 set anywhere and not have the war in it, and so Matt's older brother, Kyle, he's a tunnel rat in Cu Chi. He's in the army, and he's due to return home during the course of the book. The book takes place in, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it is, and Kyle is due home if he doesn't get killed. And so there's this running correspondence in the book between letter correspondence, Matt writing his brother back, and Kyle writing Matt in Laguna Beach, and Kyle tells him what's going on, and he's living under this terrible fear of the shorter you get, the more danger you're in, which is kind of a common military cliche or trope or whatever. And so that hangs over the book, whether Kyle's going to make it back or not. And I think that that relationship between the brothers is really important. And I drew on my own family and friends.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about your writing career? I'm very curious. This was your 27th book?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we have 1 through 26.
How you got into writing?
Yeah.
Oh, how I got into writing.
What started you?
Yeah, sure. I'll tell you, when I was a little kid, my mom used to read to me when I was in the crib, because I was often not very happy, and I got kind of colicky, I think, maybe, and noisy, and unsettled, and she discovered that when she read to me, I would respond. I would get quiet and I would listen to her words, even though I didn't know one single word of English when I was in the crib. And I think somehow that those rhythms and those rhythms, vocal rhythms, got into me a little bit. When I was a little bigger, age 3, 4, too young to read on my own, I remember Mom reading to me on our little white couch in Tustin, suburban Tustin, and she read animal stories to me, Vulcan the condor and Perry the squirrel and Bambi, and my favorite was Shag, Last of the Plains Buffalo. And I made her read those stories to me over and over again, sitting on that couch, because I was so captivated by them. So, jump forward a few more years to Tustin High School, my sophomore year, would have been 1970, say. And our mythology and folklore teacher punished our class because we were such a bunch of boneheads, and we were rude and just kind of, not very good students. And she says, I refuse to teach you mythology and folklore today. I want you to instead come up to my desk, and there's a pasteboard box full of books, and I want you to close your eyes and take one back to your desk and read it in silence, or I'm going to send you to the vice principal. So when it was my turn to come up, I stood in front of the box and closed my eyes and grabbed a book and pulled it out. And it was a tattered, fat paperback copy of Joseph Heller's Catch-22. And I took it at my desk and started reading it. And I read it, assiduously for the next 2 or 3 weeks. It took me a long time to read it. I'm kind of a slow reader. And that book kind of changed my life. I couldn't believe what an interesting story that was, and how it was nothing like, it was even better than Shag, Last of the Plains Buffalo. It took the number one spot for me, and it beat out The Old Man and the Sea, which I'd read in the 8th grade. And anyway, that book changed my life. And I remember thinking, if you ever could write a book and give your readers a thousandth of the pleasure that you got from that book, you would have to consider yourself a successful writer. And I think in some oddball way, I'm still carrying on that. A semester in San Diego, and then a year and a half in Costa Mesa at Orange Coast, and then a couple of years at UC Irvine. I got an English degree in '76. And during that time, I kind of wanted to be a writer, but I didn't write anything. I didn't have anything to say. I didn't have anything to write. I was too busy doing my homework, And when I got out, I wanted to get a job as a newspaper reporter, because that's what Hemingway did. And I thought it would be a great way to see the world, and introduce yourself to the world as an adult rather than a college student. And I finally got a job on a little paper in Newport Beach called the Newport Ensign. And I got to write all sorts of stuff. It was a little paper. And no sooner had I started at the Ensign writing reportage than I also started, taking a handful of clean white sheets of typing paper and wrapping it up in my IBM Selectric typewriter that we had. This is pre-computer, right? And I'd take it home after work, and I began working on a novel after work. And I wrote after work and on weekends and holidays and all that. And I worked for 5 years on that book, and it finally became, after 6 drafts, Laguna Heat, my first book, and it was published in 1985.
5 years?
Yeah, that was a long one. I'll tell you why. It's because I was a young writer, and I was very much still hypnotized by my idols, the guys that I read, and the women that I read that were so good, So it took me a whole year to write one draft of that book, and it was bad Hemingway. And then it took me another year, and it was bad Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the third year, it was bad Raymond Chandler. And the fourth year, it was bad Jim Harrison. And the fifth year, it was bad Tom McGuane. So finally, when it got time for me to write what I said was going to be the final draft of that book, I made a deal with myself that I was not going to try to call on any of my heroes anymore. I had digested them, and I'd been inspired by them, and I wanted to banish them from my brain when I wrote this, what I intended to be the final draft of that book. And I did that. It took me forever to think of the first sentence of that book, half a day. And I'm playing around with the clauses and the commas and all that stuff. But when I had it down, and I realized that the sentence didn't sound like any of those writers that I so admired. It sounded like me. And I morphed that first sentence into the entire 500-page manuscript. And when I was done with it, I realized that I actually had my own book here, saying it was a great book or anything like that. I'm just saying it was mine. And I hadn't based it on my heroes. And I was quite proud of the fact that I had, managed to, find my own voice. There it was. I'd heard about finding your voice forever from, college professors. And yep, there it was. And that book got published too. It was Laguna Heat. It did really well. It set me on my way.
Holy mackerel. Did you have a hard time finding publishers for your following books?
Yeah, I did. Not super hard. It's not like every publisher in town turned it down, but I'll tell you, it's a good story. My agent sent it out to 4 major U.S. publishers simultaneously, and we were hoping that one of them would have some interest. And so Jane said, the agent said, well, I'm going to send it out to 4 publishers, and you will get good news by phone, bad news by mail, and I'll get 20% of everything you make if there's an offer. And I said, okay, sounds fair to me. So I waited a month or so, whatever it was, and here comes a letter to me via Jane from Simon & Schuster. And they say, dear Mr. Parker, read the manuscript, loved it. Can't publish it, great characters, terrible plot. I thought, okay, I can live with that. A week later, we get another letter, major U.S. publisher, Crown. Dear Mr. Parker, read the manuscript, loved it. Can't publish it, lousy characters, but great plotting. Thought, okay, I can understand that. Week later, it's Random House. Dear Mr. Parker, read the manuscript, loved it. Can't publish it. This was one of the most complicated books that we've ever read, and we don't really know what happened. And then the 4th week, I got another major letter from a U.S. publisher. I forget who it was now. And they say, dear Mr. Parker, read the manuscript, loved it. Can't publish it. For a mystery, this book was so simple, we had it figured out on page 8. I'm getting all these, directly contradictory statements from major New York publishers, and I didn't know what to think. I was just thinking, I don't know. So the week after that, Jane calls, good news by phone, and she goes, well, St. Martin's Press in New York is going to call you in a few hours and make an offer for that book because the editor there, Jared Keeling, was up all night reading it, and they're prepared to make you an offer. So that's the way it all came down. This kind of. So I always tell young writers or any writer who's beginning to submit, manuscripts to publishers to, brace yourself for wide opinions and stick to your guns and try to believe in your work as much as you can and realize that the publishing scene and everywhere, New York especially, is it's a real subjective kind of thing, those 4 editors who took the time to write me, liked the book, but not enough to publish it, all for completely different reasons. And the publisher who did like it, really fell in love with the book, unquestioningly. So it just shows you how much variety there is in taste. And fiction's kind of like music. I think, some of it you like and some of it you don't.
Appreciate the fact you spent all this time with us. And everyone we speak to have already read your book, but if anybody hasn't read it, I'm sure this is going to interest them.
Yes, our time is up. We've been getting the signal, but it's just wonderful spending the time with you. Thank you so very, very much.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
We had such a delightful time with our author, Jefferson Parker. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a terrific visit with Eyes on Books. We want to invite you back again next month for the next session.
We thank you for tuning in to Eyes on Books. And if you have any books that you think might make an interesting discussion or authors who are good speakers, we'd love to hear your suggestions. Contact us at eyesonbooks@yahoo.com and keep watching